It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
On a Wednesday, and great to have you with us. Thank you, Chad Erickson. Lots to do over the next 60 minutes. It's a Wednesday, which means Kurt Helin drops by. Pro basketball talk at NBCSports.com is his jam. The NBA in-season tournament got started last night. They call it the NBA Cup. We'll talk about that. There were some great games to start the NBA Cup, so we'll get into that, including the Warriors and the Mavericks with Stephen Curry cooking late. Let's bring in our friend Nick Ferguson to start the show today. Why not? Let's talk college football playoff, a little NFL as well. I'm going to start with the college football playoff, only because those rankings came out on Tuesday night. So I want to get your thoughts on sort of where this bracket is right now. Georgia is the first team out. Obviously, after their loss to Ole Miss, you sort of see where the top 10 line up right now, and still a lot of chips left to fall. Obviously, with Indiana still to play Ohio State, and Oregon, like right now, looks like a shoo-in for the playoffs.
Yeah, they do. I mean, Dan Lanning has that team playing out of their mind, and Gabriel, I mean, he's in the running for the Heisman. So as long as they keep on winning, he should be right there front and center in New York City. But I have to tell you, I mean, just kind of looking at the setup, I mean, BYU being where they are, man, and they survived against Utah because it looked like Utah was going to overtake them, but they just had enough in the tank. And obviously, the refs, once again, that their names are coming up as far as helping BYU in a particular situation, which made Utah coaches and fans highly upset, but you got to go back and watch the tape. But the one thing that was really interesting, Miami still remaining where they are after losing to Georgia Tech. I thought that the committee was somehow going to just drop them further than they actually was. So a lot of surprises in college football and a lot more to come.
Yeah, I am surprised on the Miami thing as well, with them not dropping further. Give me a thought on the four right now that would get buys. You mentioned Miami. We talk about Oregon, BYU, Texas. If you're just looking at those four right now, is Oregon the clear class of that crop of teams?
Absolutely. And the second team would be Texas for me. But looking at what Oregon was able to do, or has been able to do, and, it goes without saying because, Bo Nix was the straw that stirred the drink for the Oregon's offense. And I thought once Bo left, that was it. Oregon was going to take a dive and a dip for at least 2 to 3 years. But it shows what you can do with your program. You bring a guy in at the quarterback position, and that guy doesn't miss a beat. And Gabriel, once again, this is why his name is being mentioned, and as far as being the front runner for the Heisman based on how well they've been performing. And Oregon is not used to being in this spot and really dealing with the pressure, JP, of being number one. But it seemed week after week, they just find a way to do what they need to do to actually hold on to that spot.
We talked about it a little bit on Monday. Carson Beck's draft stock has to be taking a bit of a hit right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, okay, so Carson Beck was like, well, you were handed the car keys to a Corvette, just don't wreck it. And it just seems as though week after week, he keeps wrecking it. They build it back together, and he wrecks it again because it's insane the number of interceptions that he is throwing. And if you're Kirby Smart, you have to say, well, if there's anything derailing my team, anything, it is at the quarterback position. So, I don't know what's going on in Carson Beck's mind or what do they need to do to help him, but, man, he's got to keep down his turnovers.
Is the SEC getting too much love? We were talking about this on Monday with Bill Bender, the Sporting News. And I'm trying to figure out because, look, I think they got 9 teams in the top 25. Obviously, the strength of schedule for a lot of the teams, depending on sort of the card you draw and which schedule you get this year. The strength of schedule is obviously a beast compared to what a lot of other teams are facing. We talked about Colorado last week. They haven't beaten a top 25 team yet, but they haven't played that many top 25 teams. It feels like every week in the SEC, some of these teams are playing a top 25 team. Is the SEC getting too much respect, not enough, or just right?
No, I mean, this is SEC bias, and this has been going on for years. Think about where the college football rankings actually come out. They come out on a 4-letter network, right? And think about their involvement with the SEC. You got Paul Feinbaum. They have to find a way to keep the SEC relevant. And don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some teams who are playing, great football. Ole Miss, Alabama, LSU. They're playing great football. But the idea is that a 1-loss or 2-loss SEC team is better than any undefeated team. How many times have we had that conversation over and over again? But we've been beat over the head with the SEC. So everyone thinks that the SEC is the best conference in college football. That's why teams are trying to get into the SEC so they can be part of the conversation when we get to this point of the year. But the SEC, fine teams, doing well, but it's a top-heavy conference. I've always viewed, dating back 8 years ago, but it's just everyone is drunk the Kool-Aid from the SEC. And when you do that, you forget about, Boise. You forget about BYU. You forget about Ohio State, right? You forget about a lot of those teams. Texas, who had to jump to the SEC to make sure they're part of the conversation. So to me, I think we need to start looking at things, with a full open lens, because there's some college football being played in some other conferences as well.
Last one on the college, and then we'll take a break, and I'll get you on the NFL. Colorado, look, say what I want to say about them. Win going on the road into Texas Tech and beating that team, in pretty convincing fashion, they are changing some perceptions.
Well, they are, because this was the game that, for me, could set the table for the CU Buffs, because Iowa State played Texas Tech and they lost, right? So CU needed to have a great showing against Texas Tech, and also they need to pile up the points, right? You need style points when it comes to the committee and viewing CU and wanting to put them, in the college football playoffs. But all the heavy lifting has to be done by CU. Another big game this weekend, and Big News Sunday is going to be in Boulder, as they take on Utah. That's a game that they have to win. They have to continue to win. And they just can't rest on their laurels like, yeah, we're now ranked and we're moving up the charts. People now see us. No, if you want to face off against BYU in the Big 12 championship, which I am looking forward to, and I definitely want to see, you have to continue to win games.
If there is one thing that I think Deion Sanders is good for as a head coach, because I don't think his in-game coaching is all that much to brag about, but if there's one thing I could say, he's not going to let them overlook that game. He's just not. I just don't see it. Nick Ferguson is hanging out with us, former NFL safety, friend of the program. I want to do some NFL with him on the other side. Kurt Helin still to come later in the show, talking NBA. Lots to do on a Wednesday Sports Wrap. From college football, we switch gears to the NFL on this Wednesday edition of Sports Wrap. We're hanging out with our friend Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety, KOA Radio in Denver, former Denver Bronco. I got to tell you, Nick, I know they lost, and I know they're going to say, Bill Parcells, no moral victories, and you are what your record is, and they're 5-5, and right now they're a wild card team. But I want to ask you about the Broncos, because I have so much positivity around this team watching them right now. And maybe it's because they've been so bad for so long, especially at the quarterback position. But I can't help but feel good about the trajectory of this team right now, even as heartbreaking a loss as that is to the Chiefs on Sunday.
Yeah, I feel the same way, JP, because for me, it's about the quarterback position. And watching Bo Nix kind of grow right before our eyes is so important. And here's a stat for you. If you look over the past 4 games, the Broncos have not performed well in the third and fourth quarter. The last 2 games, let me give you that. The Broncos have scored no points first quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. Their best quarter has been the second quarter. Coming out of halftime, I don't know the issue with the adjustments, but it's not enough adjustments to kind of move them along. But in the moments that they need, Bo shows up. So if you are a Broncos fan, even though the season may not be going the way that you wanted to, or the past 2 weeks, the team is at 500. This is probably at a point where not too many people are actually Vegas odds They didn't even have the team being at this point of the season the way they are right now. But the reason the Broncos are is because of their defense. And I for one don't believe that the defense and Vance Joseph are getting enough credit for what they've done to this point, nationally or locally. But Bo Nick's maturation process and his growth is the thing that gives Broncos fans encouragement that come 2025, 26, and beyond, this team will be much better.
Let me ask you about the team that beat the Broncos in the Kansas City Chiefs. Can they, there's a lot of people, glass half full, glass half empty. Yes, they're undefeated. Yes, they're winning these games. But the idea that maybe in 6 or 7 of the games they've played this year, they've been sort of a mid-looking team, but still finding ways to win and make plays late. How do you look at it? Is it glass half full, glass half empty?
Well, I look at it as a team that is adapting, finding other ways to win that we're not accustomed to watching them win because we're used to.
But can you sustain that over a 17 game season and then the playoffs? Is that a sustainable way to win a Super Bowl the way they're playing right now? I guess that's the better question.
The answer to the question is yes. Now remember, let's go back to Brad Johnson, right? Playing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? He was just a serviceable quarterback, but they had decent special teams and they ran the ball, they utilized their running backs, and they played great defense. Now, even though it doesn't look the same because we're talking about Brad Johnson and Patrick Mahomes, arguably the best quarterback in the game today. So they don't seem as though that's an excellent comp. But when you think about it, yes, it is, because what's going to happen over time with any team? Other teams are going to try to figure you out. There's going to be some guys leaving your roster. You're going to have to find ways to play with guys who may not be top 8 guys. You're playing with third-tier guys, and this is what the Chiefs are doing, and this is the thing that makes them dangerous. I mean, the games that you're talking about, they could have lost against the Chargers, the Raiders, the Broncos, right? The 49ers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, they could have lost so many games, but somehow, some way, they had some player stand up in that moment and make it play. For me, it's reminiscent of 2015 when the Broncos had Peyton Manning and he had the no-fly zone. Everyone's like, oh, the Broncos need a turnover. The Tom Brady and the Patriots are moving the ball down the field. And guess what we know? There's a pick six. Chris Harris, Bradley Roby, or so many other guys. This is where Kansas City is. And everyone's wondering, no, this can't be sustainable. This can't be sustainable. This is the NFL. And for those teams who find ways to win games, not find ways to lose them, right? We just watched the Broncos find a way to lose a game. The Chiefs found a way to win a game. That's the thing that makes them dangerous. And the reason it makes them dangerous, JP, because they're always in the freaking game.
Let me go to Gotham for a second here, a city you are familiar with. I know what the competitor in you is going to say, but let me make you the GM. Or the owner of the Giants. Are you tanking for Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward at this point, given where this franchise is, given what we know about Daniel Jones, and knowing what a Sanders or a Cam Ward could wind up being at the next level?
No, man, you tanking for anything, right? Those two guys are your hope, but you're tanking for anything. And you don't have to tank on purpose. I mean, your roster dictates that you're tanking anyway.
No, but hold on. I disagree with that. I feel like the only piece that's really missing from this team being a solid playoff team is the quarterback position. So I don't.
Man. Have you watched the Giants?
I have. Of course I have. Do you see the helmet above my head that I just got?
I see that. Listen, I mean, look. With Brian Burns and what they were doing with Thibodeau, not Thibodeau. I'm trying to remember the guy who's opposite him. But anyway, their defense is starting to come along from a pass rush standpoint. They need to get better in the back end. But offensively, they have issues. It's not just Daniel Jones being able to protect any quarterback, Cam or Shedeur, and being able to run the ball effectively and having other wide receiver options other than
I love Neighbors.
Right? I mean, so it's crazy what's happening with this team. So it goes far beyond Daniel Jones, and the team made a mistake when they chose
Yeah.
Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley, and now they have to eat that at this moment. And if I'm Cam Ward, if I'm Shador Sanders, I don't want to go to New York.
Oh, come on.
No, I don't. I don't, because once again, here's what's going to happen. It's the same situation that the Bears find themselves in. Ryan Poles and the Bears have made mistake after mistake. Right now, they fired Shane Waldron because they said it was his fault. No, your offensive line is terrible. Your team leads the league in sacks. So you don't want to go to a team that's going to put you behind the high level of criticism. And I know, I played and I lived in New York. I mean, if it's Cam Ward, if it's Shador, if it's Gabriel, they're going to eat your lunch.
Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety. Conversation to be continued. Nick, I always appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for hanging out. We'll talk soon.
It seemed like you appreciate your Giants more.
All right, we did some football with Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety. Now let's do some NBA. It's Kurt Helin of Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com.
I did not play in the league. Yeah, just.
Did you play any sports growing up?
Oh yeah, no. Actually, I played basketball growing up. I just, my 6-inch vertical leap kind of limited my peak at. It's 6 foot height, kind of limited my.
Yeah, fair enough. But it is funny. We were just talking about it off air. The NBA Cup begins, and all of a sudden, what feels like sort of the early season malaise and just kind of going through the motions and almost like extended training camp and guys getting into shape. All of a sudden, it's like somebody flipped the switch and we were playing basketball again.
It is contrived. It is a completely contrived, made up, hey, we're going to offer a tournament in this November and December for the NBA. But you don't get to be in the NBA. Well, you don't get to be in professional sports, football, whatever, unless you're competitive. You don't go through everything you've got to go through to be a professional athlete unless you're ultra competitive. And I don't care if it's contrived. If you put it out there and say, hey, there's something you got to win, go win this. Steph Curry's talking about it after scoring the final 12 points and it was best game of the night, actually, maybe probably the best game of the season. Great energy in the building at Chase Center with Clay coming back. He scores the final 12 points and he's storming off. We're 1-0 in the Cup. The guys care about this. And if they care, the games get interesting.
Yeah, that game was like, I don't know, 112, 105, something like that with a few minutes left. I was at bowling watching it as we were getting ready to get started last night. And, I'm kind of like, wow, this is a good win for the Mavericks on the road. Golden State's playing well. And then the wheels just fell off and they could not stop Stephen Curry down the stretch in that game. I know it's early in the year, and I know it's an NBA Cup game, and everybody's playing hard in the emotion of Clay. Is there something in that result last night that gives you pause when it comes to the Mavericks, or is it just simply Stephen Curry taking over late?
No, I don't have any pause with Dallas. And here's the thing. They've lost 3 in a row. They're below 500. They've lost 3 in a row by a total of 6 points. 1 by 1, 1 by 2, now 1 by 3. That's kind of fluky. That's just kind of unlucky. And you can say, oh, they're not performing in the clutch or whatever. They're just that stuff will come back into form. I still think they're one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the West. That was just one of those nights. And Curry is Curry. At the end of the day, whether we're doing it in Paris or we're doing it at the Chase Center, he is still capable of those moments.
He had 20. Luka had 22 at the half, and I watching him in the first half. I'm like, he might go for 50. Only finished with 31. I know I'm saying only 31, but second half he was kind of meh.
Yes, but when you load up on him, you had a really good second half from Kyrie Irving. They've just now that they've got you load up on him, and he doesn't have to push through it quite the same way because they've got other scores. And now Clay knocking down Clay out of season high 22. They've got other scoring around there. Their offense, I think, is better. The question has simply been, can they get enough stops? And generally, so far, so good. I mean, they didn't get enough stops down the stretch with Steph Curry, but if you'd like to join that list, it's pretty long.
Yes, it is. What the hell happened in Detroit last night?
Oh my God.
I mean, Eric Spoelstra is widely regarded as the best coach in the NBA. And he had his Chris Webber moment last night. I mean, calling a timeout when he had none left. By the way, you want to talk about cool atmospheres? Detroit last night, that place was amped up for that game. And you know what? You turn around right now, the Pistons aren't all that bad. But what the hell happened with Eric Spoelstra last night?
Yeah, the Pistons are entertaining and they're feisty. They're actually pretty good. Cade Cunningham's taken a big step again this year. I think it was just a moment of frustration. Tyler Hero got into the lane, tied it up with 1.8 seconds left. Little 40 points on the night from Tyler, 40 and 8, like banked 10 threes. The banks just shot in off the glass. All they got to do is get one stop. And it's not only hey, all right, great offense, beats great defense sometimes. The tying shot was Jalen Duren getting free running to the rim for an alley-oop from Bam Adebayo. It was bad defense by Miami. Great play call, great setup by Detroit. 1.8 seconds left, man. You can't let somebody get an alley-oop running to the rim, off the inbound. And I think in frustration, he just called that timeout because that's what you would do to set. He's got 1.1 left. I can set something up. And then he didn't realize, and I didn't realize, you don't get the ball out after that.
No.
The ball goes back to the other team. He tried to put Kevin Love in because Kevin Love's so good at length of the court passes. And then he had to pull him back out because you don't have him. And that was it. He called it horrendous. A little humble pie for, look, he's the best coach in the NBA right now, but a little humble pie for him. That was a, like you said, Chris Webber level blunder.
Yes, it was. Give me a thought on the Knicks who went into Philadelphia. Joel Embiid makes his debut last night. Plays a little better in the second half than he did in the first. But the Knicks go into Philadelphia and get a win against the 76ers.
Look, your Knicks are playing pretty well. Look, I think that ultimately...
I think they're going to be fine long term. Yeah,
I think they're starting to find their footing a little bit. They've had some rough losses. I think they're a little better than they've shown. Right now, they're probably the third best team in the East. I don't know where they are in the standings because it's, Cleveland, Boston, Cliff, everybody else. But I think they're capable, the one team more capable than anybody else of climbing up. By the way, Philadelphia, I don't think I've watched them now in person out here in LA and seen them a few times, a bunch of times on TV. I don't think they have enough around their big three. Even when they get those three healthy, I think there's a real limit to how good they're going to be.
So it's roster construction. I mean, who's going to take the fall for that ultimately?
I think you can tweak that roster a little. Well, maybe you can't.
Really?
Maybe not. I don't think Daryl Morey is going to pay a price for it. Let's put it that way. But I'm not sure. I think Golden State, talking about earlier, we replaced Klay Thompson with a little more depth, a couple of players who are good, and depth and defense is getting them through. Daryl Morey went the opposite way, old school big three, and I'm not sure in today's NBA that really works because you have to surround, in a second apron world, you have to surround them with players on minimum contracts, and occasionally you hit one of those, but generally those guys are on minimum contracts for a reason. And I'm just not sure there's enough around them.
I don't like the Knicks being the complete antithesis of the Warriors, though, and playing 8 guys a night and thinking that's sustainable. I want to actually ask you a question about that here in just a couple of minutes. Kurt Helin's hanging out with us from Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. Get his thoughts on some other items around the league. And a question about the way the Knicks are doing it and the way the Warriors are doing it, because they're total opposites of each other when you look at the way those rosters are being managed. Kurt will talk about that. We'll ask him about the Bucks. Also, I haven't talked to him about the Magic since they lost Ben Caro. I want to talk about that too. Sports Wrap continues on a Wednesday. All right, let's go. Segment 4 on Sports Wrap coming up in 10 minutes. The biggest question I have when it comes to Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. And it's not about the styles and all of that. I have one question. I'll ask it in 10 minutes. See, we call that a tease in the business, Kurt Helin.
You're a professional.
That's the tease. No prompters, nothing. Just go. I wanted to ask you about sort of the style, the way about the Knicks are going and the way the Warriors are doing it. are polar opposites. You got the Knicks who play, 8 guys in a night, basically, sometimes even less. Ask so much of their starters. By the way, all 5 starters for the Knicks last night, scoring in double figures. And then you have the way the Warriors are going about it in the second half of that TNT doubleheader last night, where they're playing like 11 or 12 guys. Is either sustainable or is either a long-term strategy to win a championship? If one is more than the other, I'm just wondering if you have an opinion on it.
The problem with the Knicks system is obvious, right? Like if you're one piece away from the Jenga thing, what do you call that? The Jenga tower
puzzle. Yeah,
over.
Jenga puzzle, yeah.
Falling over, right? Like you don't have much depth. You're asking a lot. You're going to ask guys to step up there, and sometimes you get that. But also, I think that come the playoffs, you're now a little better suited as long as you're working trying different things within that group, because come the playoffs, you're not going to run 12 out there. And I think what the Warriors are doing is great for the regular season. And this is truly my belief about them, which is that they may finish with a top 2 or 3 seed in the West. They are playing great defense. That depth is getting them through. And then at the end of the game, you got Curry doing Curry things like we saw last night. Gets to the playoffs. I'm going to, and I've got better defenders because I'm playing better teams, and they're focusing on shutting down Steph Curry. Who's their second shot creator?
I thought that same thing last night. I was like, who's beating you on that team other than Steph? Maybe Buddy Hield?
Buddy Hield, but you're getting Buddy Hield. You're banking on Buddy Hield being consistent, but he's more of a guy who's the shots created for him and he knocks it down. He does a little creation, but you don't have a true second shot creator. And I know that, look, they're going to be active in the trade market. There's nothing quiet there. They are trying to get a second shot creator. They did all summer. They went after, Lauri Markkanen and Paul George, and they will go after guys like that. They don't really want Zach LaVine. Can't blame them. But if they can get a secondary shot creator, they will go do it tomorrow, because I think they realize ultimately they need one more. But it gets you through the regular season at a really high level. I think that they're playing great basketball for the first 82.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think it's very difficult to play that many guys when you get to the postseason, when rosters and generally rotations will start to sort of narrow in. Good win for the Hawks last night, huh? I mean, in Boston, this isn't the Celtics without Jaylen Brown anymore. I know it isn't Porzingis, no Porzingis out there, but that's a good win for Atlanta last night.
No Trae Young, and they still get the win. That's a quality win for the Hawks, and I get the feeling that was the Celtics just haven't been as sharp the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if that's, call it a championship hangover, call it midseason malaise, call it whatever you want. They just haven't looked. I don't question that they're going to be there at the end of the season and have one of the best records in the East, but they look like they're in a little bit of a funk.
Can I say this, though? Every time the Hawks are I say it every time Trae Young isn't playing for the Hawks, sometimes they look a lot better without him. I can't get it happened last year, when they made a run to the postseason. I keep seeing it with Atlanta. They're better off without Trae Young.
It's almost like the ball moves and guys share it and try different things. It's kind of crazy. And by the way, Jalen Johnson there, if you're looking for a most improved player bet, he might be the early leader, and get him before the price gets down too low.
I haven't talked to you about this. Where does Orlando go with no Banchero? For an indefinite period. Who knows when he's back? I don't know if you have more information on that than I do, but nobody knows when he's coming back with that oblique injury. This was supposed to be the year where they sort of go up, where they sort of take that next step. If you're that organization, do you just sell on the year? Or is there, if Banchero's going to be out, if this is a season-ending thing, where are they going? I mean, will they be active in the trade market? What do they do? Because you can't count on Franz and Mo. It sounds like a Three Stooges skit. Scoring 50 every night. I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah, Jalen Suggs, who you're now leaning on, who's frankly out there because he's an elite wing defender. They didn't get a secondary shot creator in the offseason, and this is the price of that. Like they need one more guy besides Banchero, ideally a point guard who creates for them. Without it, you see what happens. Their offense falls apart. They're still a very good defensive team, but they simply can't score enough to win, and there's not another answer. And it's got to be solved through the trade market. They looked this summer, but they're trying to get somebody who fit their culture, and it had to be perfect, and perfect fits are rare. And I don't know what they're going to do, but I think by next offseason, they really have to. Franz Wagner's great. Jalen Suggs is great. Mo, on down the line. They're great, but they're third, fourth, fifth best guys, right? Like they're right. Guys in the rotation. They're not. You got to go get one more 1A guy.
I've got 30 seconds here, not featured with video in this segment. Bucks win last night, but that thing is a mess right now. The chances that Giannis Antetokounmpo is dealt before the trade deadline?
Almost none. They're not going to trade him unless he asks out. I would be shocked if he does it before the season ends. However, next summer, I think that if this is a really bad year, if this continues all season, next summer could be a very different story. He might get frustrated. And by the way, Heat, Warriors, Nets are the names you hear.
Could Doc be a casualty here?
They owe him a lot of money, so yeah. I'm not. Well,
and they probably owe Mike Budenholzer a lot of money too.
That's the problem. Yeah. Now you're paying two. You're going to pay three coaches.
Yeah. Kurt Helin, Pro Basketball Talk. Thank you, my friend.
Take care.
Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of Sports Wrap. Odds and Ends wraps it up in 10 minutes. Never know what you're going to find there. Tomorrow, Diana Rossini will join us on the show. Get some thoughts with her on the NFL. What's going on behind closed doors? She'll have some answers for us on that. I am trying to get us a really good guest on this Mike Tyson, Jake Paul fight. I don't want to say who it's going to be, but I am efforting for a really cool guest for Thursday's show to talk about the Mike Tyson-Jake Paul fight, which will be on Netflix. If you have not subscribed to our Substack yet, go and do it. All sorts of great content waiting there for you each and every day. We have insider betting picks from Sam Yarnell. We've got the show that you missed. We throw 3 clips up there every day on the Substack. It's free to subscribe, SportsWrap Substack. Go and check that out today. Speaking of Mike Tyson and Jake Paul, who will meet on Friday at AT&T Stadium in Dallas on Netflix. Still plenty of good seats apparently available. The prices have dropped precipitously since this fight was announced to where we are now. I think you can get ringside seats for like $1,200, and they were like $40,000 when the fight was announced. You can get into the stadium, I believe, to watch the fight for $71, I think now. Those were as high at one point as like $90 or even more than that. So plenty of opportunities if you want to go to Dallas and watch this fight. But as I sit here and kind of think about where we are with Mike Tyson getting set to take on Jake Paul, 58-year-old Mike Tyson. Now, I want you to think about your own life, okay? Maybe you're watching the show, you're in your 20s or your 30s, and you have a father who's 58 years old. And think about what your dad is like at 58. Now, I get it. Mike Tyson's no ordinary human being, right? I mean, he is one of the most ferocious athletes of this generation or any generation. Maybe, I guess, of the last generation is where we think of him. And people of a certain age certainly have an appreciation for what we're about to see with Jake Paul squaring off against Mike Tyson. But as I was sitting in bed last night, and I knew I wanted to talk about this, but everything's about angles, and we're always trying to figure out what's the best angle, right? And to me, I come from a journalism background. I started in media as a news anchor, as a reporter, as a sports reporter, covering games, covering news events, interviewing people, that sort of thing. And one of the things we always talk about as journalists when you're covering a story is who, what, where, why, how. Those are the pillars of what you're trying to get at when you write a story. And I could come up with the who. We obviously know Jake Paul, Mike Tyson. Name power. What a boxing spectacle. But not much more than that. Part of a much larger card. I don't think this could just stand on its own and you'd put it, in AT&T Stadium. You surround it with other great fights. Where AT&T Stadium, Jerry World, Dallas. It's going to be, hopefully there'll be a lot of people there. We'll wait and see on that. I think a lot of people are going to watch on Netflix. How? It's all right there. But the one question I cannot get past when I think about this fight, the one thing I cannot wrap my head around, why? Why in the year 2024 do we need to see Mike Tyson at 58 years old get into a ring with Jake Paul? That's the one. And if anybody out there watching the show right now, if anybody out there can explain to me why this is a good idea, I am all ears. You see my handle on X. You can feel free to email me, jason@decibel88.com. I need somebody to explain to me why it's in the best interests of all involved. I guess in Jake Paul's case, I can understand. It gives him another head to put on his mantle if he is the one to knock out the famous Mike Tyson. But I can't wrap my head around the why this is happening. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong here. There's a lot that can go wrong. Mike Tyson's 58 years old. I mean, the athletic commission in Texas decided to sanction this thing and say, hey, it's all right, we could do this. But there's a lot that can go wrong here. I'm not rooting for that. I don't want to see that. But be prepared, because it's Mike Tyson. And you never know what the hell's going to happen when he gets into the ring. One thing I'm going to say. There is a possibility Mike Tyson actually wins this fight. Now, I'm not going to lie. I'm rooting for Mike Tyson to win. Because anything that kind of ends this Jake Paul charade, anything that ends, sort of his 15 minutes, which has turned into 20 or 30 minutes of fame, I'm more than okay with. I have no idea what's going to happen when Friday night comes around and these two meet up. I still can't get over some of the videos of Mike Tyson in some of his training sessions. They had the open workout in Dallas yesterday, and I'm watching him move around the ring. I don't know what his stamina is going to be like and if he can hold up for an entire fight. And if I'm Jake Paul, I just wait him out, let him punch himself out, and then try to go in for the kill late. We'll see what happens. Odds and ends are next. All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Wednesday. Sam Yarnell returns tomorrow to hang out with us. Diana Rossini will join the fray with The Athletic, podcaster as well, ESPN alum. Diana Rossini will come and play in the sandbox with us on Thursday's show. Get some thoughts of what's going on behind closed doors with a lot of these NFL teams. And we'll do some NFL. Coming up right now, well, one second. First of all, I want to tell you guys, if you have not done so yet, subscribe to the SportsWrap with Jason Page podcast, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Spotify, YouTube. It's on our Substack. You can get the podcast there and subscribe. Google Play. Maybe not Google Play anymore. Google Play? No, Google Play's out. It's YouTube. It's YouTube podcast now that you got to get it through. TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Odyssey, Amazon. We're on all of them. So go and check that out. All right, now without any further delays, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, all alone. Trevor Lawrence, talking about the NFL. Trevor Lawrence doesn't look like he is going to play this week. He has been ruled out by the Jags. And he's going to miss his second consecutive game with a left shoulder injury, according to Doug Peterson, making that known on Wednesday morning. So Mac Jones will get the start against the Lions. Jones was 14 of 22 for 111 yards, turned the ball over 3 times, couple of interceptions, sacked 3 times. In a game that was there for the Jags. I mean, they lost 12-7. I mean, that game was there to be had. And Mac Jones just not able to do much in that spot start. He'll get one more this week. But here's the thing. Look, there's 2 teams right now at the top of the NFL draft order if we're talking about the 2025 draft. It'd be the Jags at number 1 and the Giants at number 2 if the draft were held today. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of dominoes that fall. Teams win games, teams lose games, tiebreaker scenarios, all that. But if you're the Jags and you get the number 1 overall pick, there's nothing you can do. There's virtually nothing you can do at the quarterback position because you are locked in to Trevor Lawrence. You know, when the Giants did the awful Daniel Jones deal, I mean, it's awful in retrospect. When the Giants did the awful Daniel Jones deal a couple of years ago, they did it with outs. They can get out of it after this year. The Jaguars have no luxury when it comes to getting rid of Trevor Lawrence or getting out of that deal. There are no outs in it that are realistic until 2029. He's going to get his money. And unless you find some, trade partner that you can work something out with who can fit him in their cap. I mean, it's a mess for Jacksonville. So you're probably talking Travis Hunter if you're Jacksonville and you have the top overall pick in this year's draft. That's your best case scenario right now if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. So they're in a tough situation, and it's because you handcuffed yourself to a quarterback that, 1, wasn't playing that well this year, and 2, can't stay healthy. To baseball. We've got news out of Tampa Bay when it comes to the Rays and their stadium situation. I think they said it's going to cost like $55 million for the Rays to fix their stadium. And there was talk about whether or not they would fix it with the team preparing to move into a new ballpark in a few years. Well, they are going to fix it. But here's the bad news. That stadium, Tropicana Field, will not be ready for the 2025 season. In fact, they won't be playing there all year. Leading contenders right now include the Yankees spring training complex in Tampa, which, by the way, I think it seats like 12 or 13,000, which is about what the Rays average for attendance anyway. So it's probably not a huge loss for the Tampa Bay Rays if you're talking about a situation where they have to play at that facility, which is obviously Major League ready given the fact that it hosts spring training. So it has to be Major League ready for that reason. Wander Franco, speaking of the Rays, he's back in the news. Did you see the story the other day? Going to face charges of illegal use and possession of a firearm related to his arrest in an altercation with police in the DR, out in the countryside. Boy, you want to talk about a 23-year-old who has completely destroyed his own life. Wander Franco is certainly that guy. He is accused of all sorts of things, including sex with a minor and prostitution and all of this stuff. You want to talk about a dramatic fall over the last, 18 months for somebody that was thought to be one of the next big stars in Major League Baseball. I mean, one of the poster childs for sort of what baseball could wind up being, the future of baseball in Tampa. And I will still say this now. When we look back years from now at sort of where the Rays are, if it doesn't pan out for them with this group and sort of this leadership team and all of that, they're going to look back at that Wander Franco deal and say, hey, we put all our eggs in that Wander Franco basket. And as something they're going to look at as sort of a turning point within that organization. Just a wild story and a wild turn of events there when it comes to those guys. Still no news on the Juan Soto front. We'll keep an eye on it. Hopefully he winds up back in New York with the Yankees. Could wind up staying in New York and playing for the Mets. It's going to do it for us. Thank you to Kurt Helin. Thanks, Nick Ferguson. Sam's back tomorrow. Diana Rossini on the show. We'll see you then.